Our first speaker today is Lisa Paige. Lisa is a licensed social worker and registered dietitian nutritionist. She lives and works in the Roaring Fork Valley of Colorado. After a successful IT career, Lisa moved into clinical and long-term care in 2008, first as a um, registered dietitian nutritionist. During the COVID panic, Lisa again pivoted to a new career in social work and became licensed in 2023. One of her first roles as a social worker was to facilitate a new Parkinson's disease support group in Glenwood Springs. It was during that time that Lisa became aware of the emotional shift both patient and partner experience with this diagnosis. She continues to support caregivers and patients in individual and relationship counseling. So we're very lucky to have her here with us today. Please join me in welcoming Lisa Paige.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Yes, and thank you to the Parkinson's Association for asking me to participate in this. It was a kind of a surprise in a way. And so when they asked me, I thought, okay, well, I'm not an expert on Parkinson's at all. However, I have been training on understanding relationships at the age of 60 whatever I was at the time, so 65 I guess. I thought you learn about relationships sooner rather than later, I suppose. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. The title that I have today is Keep the Feeling Alive. When my observations are that when an individual is given a chronic condition diagnosis, it is not just that individual that is impacted by the diagnosis. It's the emotional connections, the family, the people around that individual that also then are going to be impacted by that diagnosis. And so we start to wonder, what does this do? What does this do to me? What does it do to my identity? How will I be known? What will my friends think about me? What do my neighbors think about me? I'm actually reading a fiction or listening an audiobook, and one of the main characters is an individual with MS, and it's describing her emotional reactions to her community, herself, to family members, and they're very, very a deep description of some of the challenges that an individual faces when they've been given a chronic condition diagnosis. So we're going to explore a little bit of this today. And just want to make sure you know that I'm not being paid for any of this. I do not have a relationship with any of the sponsors out there. This is just completely from my heart. You read about or heard about that already? All right. So again, we have the situation. We can feel ourselves changing, or an individual seeking a diagnosis has recognized that there's changes, and so you go through the process of then seeking the diagnosis, and then again we begin to have that awareness and the shift of what we're going to call that emotional cognitive function. Okay, now sometimes we refer to our thought processes as maybe we kind of rely a lot on these, what we call our thinking. We're going to explore a little bit today of how thinking and emotion really are almost indistinguishable, right? They're so closely related. We go from one to the other with really not a whole lot of awareness. When we have something that is as significant as a neurodegenerative disease, it impacts our brain. And the brain is the organ of behavior. Now, that's my perspective. I think it's probably pretty well scientifically based. However, I do realize that sometimes it's difficult for us to remember that the brain is the organ of behavior because we don't really think of the brain as being an organ sometimes. We think of our heart, we think of our lungs, kidneys. We don't always think about what's up here. It is the organ of for emotional and cognitive function. So when we have a condition that's going to impact that brain function, we can feel pretty certain that it's going to be very difficult. We're going to find some difficulty with the emotional and the cognitive expression. What we want to do as we are have that this as this awareness grows in us is we want to use one of the themes that we use in therapy: open heart, open mind. That is our door into learning. And that's what we're really good at as humans, right? We're very, very good at learning. Sometimes, a little bit slow, but we do learn. So we want to start looking at what are the strengths that we have that we can use as we're going through this shift in our physical function, in our brain function, and then also in our emotional function. Okay, so again, this is referred to, if you all want to spend a little time out in the research, we call this emotional shifting. Emotional research is pretty darn fascinating for me anyway. I started picking up on this probably about a decade or so ago. It's not that we've really studied emotions for years and years. Some of if I mention the name Brene Brown, some of you may know that name. Okay, I got one hand up there. I got another. Way back there too. Great, wonderful. She and her colleagues have done an incredible amount of research into our emotional function. I think a lot of it is there's good science behind it, but there's a lot of observation too, right? Sometimes there are going to be emotional observations. We're not going to be able to have the nth degree of science to support that, but we sure can do some really good observations about that. Okay, I want to do just a brief overview of what are referred to as behavioral models. And this is a way of looking at, specifically for me as a therapist, I look at behavior. I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't prescribe medications. I'm a student of behavior. That's what I decided to do. You saw earlier I was in IT. Well, when I was in IT for 25 odd years, I watched a lot of behavior. We were very kind of crazy people, but it just grew and grew until I finally got to a point where I was able to then actually do the study. And but I like to present these because I think it's important that we understand there are ways for us to speak about our emotions and our behaviors, right? Sometimes we get caught up in a little bit of that. Well, this is, it's more about personality. We might hear discussion around personality. I like to get a little more direct, or maybe a lot more direct, and say, I think that's behavior. And that's behavior because you're a human being, you're very complex, and you're in this environment that is influencing whatever that behavior is. So that's just the general perspective. Okay, so a little bit of definitions here. Relationship connection. We like to speak about connections because we want to, as you'll see in a few slides here, the emotional connection in a relationship is the primary focus. When I am wanting to establish, right, with another person, when I want that person in my sphere, right? I'm going to use all my strength as a human, all that complex emotional function to then reinforce that emotional connection. Now, sometimes that's going to be, physical, so it's going to be real overt, and sometimes it's going to be very covert. It might be the way I look at someone. It might be the way I hold a hand. It could be it may not have words, okay? Um, it works as an internal motivator, right? We personalize it, we internalize it. Emotional behavior, again, the way that we express or react to our feelings. And these are the feelings that we allow, right? Some of us, with all the decades that we've gone through, we may have some feelings that are just like, I don't want those feelings, right? I'm not going to let those settle in on me. Cognitive behavior, this is the behavior, the thinking behavior. Gee, I feel this, I think I'm going to go do this, right? It's kind of that decision making, thinking behavior, but it's so closely tied to emotional, you almost don't know the difference. Emotional filtering, this is when we are looking at a situation and we might have somebody right next to us who says, hey, this is what I see. I see you doing this, right? And you could be like, that's not what I wanted to do. It's not how I feel about that. Personal bias, very important psychological concept. Bias, in some ways, we think of that word as being kind of negative in some certain situations. However, for us as functioning humans, our personal bias is what keeps us going, right? This is the way I see things, so I'm going to function in this way, and it supports my purpose and intent in my community. Again, I mentioned, I said earlier, brain is the organ of behavior, and that's just really basic for me. I actually, years ago, yeah, 1970s, years ago, I became interested in, and I really can't even really tell you how it happened, but I became very interested in brain function as a psychology student. And this concept was part of my original exploration years and years ago. And as I have gotten older, I've explored it. And in addition to in a very exciting way, other researchers have explored this. And part of this is because we do have some of the diagnostics tools, for example, like functional MRI, but we have tools that allow us to actually watch brain behavior when we are involved in some kind of activity. Ego, a very important concept. This is almost as important as bias. Ego is in some ways, sometimes it's called the self, right? But ego is that kind of psychic part of us that we do whatever we can to protect that ego. If someone says, oh, gee, you're egocentric, well, that's really not a bad thing. You're protecting yourself. And there's other concepts that go around that. We talk about, self-care boundaries and all kinds of stuff. But I just want to reinforce that ego is not a negative thing. It's a very important part of you. And then last but not least, a defense mechanism, right? Two basic defense mechanisms that we have as human beings. Either I want more of that or I don't want any of that, right? If I want more of that, that's going to motivate my behavior to move towards it and get more, and I will do whatever is necessary to get more of that. If it's nothing that I want any part of, I'm going to run away, right? I'm going to try to keep that away from me. But these defense mechanisms, what we want to do is we want to recognize when they're in place. They're important to us. Okay, so thinking about human behavior, thinking about approaches, we're just going to go through these really fast. I'm just going to give you some high points on this. I just want you to be aware of some of the perspectives so that it gives you an idea that what you're experiencing as you're shifting through your emotional shifting, and along with that, your cognitive shifting, that you're not in it alone, right? This isn't. Sometimes folks will say, "Oh gosh, my brain is da 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 da," and I just think I'm crazy. You're not. What you have is normal human behavior in a situation of very, very high stress. and a lot of uncertainty. So, very quickly, cognitive behavior therapy, internal family systems, solutions focused therapy, emotion focused therapy, and last but not least, the Gottman Foundation of Trust. These are all in the literature, so you can Google them a little bit later if you want to do more research. Okay, just real quick here, cognitive behavioral therapies, sometimes called CBT. This is going to focus us on our thoughts and feelings and behavior, so that emotional cognitive pattern, right? What we look at, and this is a really handy tool and that you can use every day. We look at trying to change that negative or distorted interpretation of behavior and of our thought. Well, you looked at me like that. Well, it's not what I meant to do. I didn't mean for that to happen. Well, yeah, but I think you were trying to tell me something. Well, tell me a little bit more. Why do you think that I'm trying to say blah, blah, blah when I look at you that way, right? That's a distortion. So when we are in a situation where emotional shifting is going to occur, distortions are very common. And we want to be able to kind of hold ourselves accountable to that. Do I have a distorted thought right now? Could I reframe this? The key components, cognitive challenging. Is that true? Is that reality? Reframing, can I shift my interpretation so that it could be less negative? And can I refocus? Yeah, that's a thought that's really bugging me a lot. I keep thinking about that. Gee whiz, I wonder what it would be like if I just turn away my focus from that thought and I, maybe take the dog for a walk or, for me, I lived in a rural area, so throwing hay bales was always very handy. Throw a few hay bales, that'll get it out of the way. Okay. Internal family systems. This is a discussion around what we call parts. And we have the three primary parts. This is our manager, firefighter, and exile. Sometimes I call it the wounded. This is the kind of thing you might find yourself doing where you say, there's part of me that really, really wants to go do blah, 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 whatever it is. And then there's another part of me that doesn't want to do that at all, right? When we start to think about these parts and we start to think about how we kind of execute this on a daily basis, a personal basis, we may find ourselves being very much in the, oh, I shouldn't do this, this is not the thing to do, everybody will think this is the wrong thing to do, or we have this other part of us, gee, I've got to follow the rules, right? And then we have the other side of that, which is, oh, I'm so sick of the rules, gee whiz, you know what, I think I'm just going to have a fifth of whiskey. That'll get it all out of my system, right? That's the firefighter. Let's just drink away the worry, right? Or some other kind of other kind of avoidance. The self, and I put this in capital letters, it is kind of it's a construct, it's a concept. The self is the part of us, that sensation of I'm grounded, I'm here, I understand my purpose, my intent, and I can make choices and decisions with confidence. Okay, solutions-focused therapy. This is a very quick sort of thing. I use this occasionally and really, truly like 15 minutes. You can do this with yourself. Generally, you use kind of a scale. You see the last bullet point there, scaling questions. Okay, boy, what am I feeling today? Okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 is like I'm having a really incredible day, and 1 is the opposite. Where am I at today? Oh, I'm about a 4. Well, what could I do to move myself to a 5? So solutions-focused therapy with some coaching, and you can even do self-coaching on this. It encourages you to focus on solutions. How can I move myself psychically from this point of feeling helplessness to another point of feeling like I've got more control? Emotion-focused therapy is deep. Definitely, because now we're going to start to put some words on all these emotions. Those of you that have read Brene Brown, might remember in one of her Atlas of the Heart book, which is, I really like that one because it was very, very research oriented. There are some research and emotion researchers that believe we have about 150 emotions. That's how complex we are as humans. It's pretty fascinating. And again, thinking about that brain as the organ of our emotion and behavior, cognition. So thinking that we have all of that emotion out there, and maybe right now you're thinking, well, I can maybe name five, 5 or 6 maybe. So this particular approach is that if we are feeling something that is feeling uncomfortable, remember that defense mechanism? Oh, I don't want that. I'm going to run away from it. This would encourage you to stay. Sometimes we say stay in the moment, stay in the present. Yes, you're feeling uncomfortable. Yeah, this is not something that comes along every day. What can we do to have you stay in that feeling for a little bit longer so that you can explore it? And we're going to talk about curiosity in just a little bit here. So we start to use these that open heart, open mind, curiosity. Can I explore this emotion? Do I have an idea of where it's coming from? Have I ever felt it before? So that's our awareness. We want to experience it and feel safe. And we want to know if that's an emotion that leads to what we might call a negative motivator. It leads to a behavior that doesn't benefit us. Can I reframe that emotion? Can I start to transform it? And then attachment focus. Now, I'm not going to talk a lot about, there's a lot of discussion about attachment theories and attachment forms. I won't do much discussion on that right now, but this is when we are in an emotional relationship, we want to understand what are those emotional needs. All right, we'll talk a little bit about that when we start to work on the I need statements. Okay, Gottman Foundation of Trust. Now, this particular perspective comes from very much relationship counseling. The Gottman theory or Gottman model is pretty extensive. There are people that credential in that. I am not credentialed. I'm not an expert. I'm only taking highlights because these particular bullet points here are really important when I begin working with either an individual or with a couple. And we start to say, well, what is that relationship commitment? What is your, how important is that connection to you, right? Because we make the connection that's the priority in a relationship. So we do a lot of discussion around trust. And if you see there, the partners consistently choose connection. Now we're going to see that topic a little bit later on, but I want to really emphasize that consistent connection or consistent choice, right? Things are really challenging when we are together. It's like, how you always do it that way, But you know what? I love you anyway. Trust is built moment by moment, right? We sometimes we think, oh gosh, I've got to take the family on the big giant vacation, and then I'll be the best dad ever. Yeah, that's a great thing. It's also nice when, maybe you take a few minutes and we read a book together or we watch a movie together, something like that. So moment by moment, we look for those opportunities to move towards the connection. How many times have you felt like, oh, gee, I just had that argument with my significant other. Bye-bye, see you later. I'm, taking a road trip, right? It happens. That's a normal reaction. I don't like any more of that stuff. I'm going to enact a defense mechanism and I'm getting out of town. It takes a lot of work to move towards what feels really uncomfortable, okay? So we want to know that it's normal, right? We're not going crazy. And we want to know that there's ways for us to, um, again, sit in that moment and say, okay, give me 5 minutes. I'll come back in a little bit. Um, Reliability, very, very important for a relationship, right? I need to know that you will be present, when something is, when I have an emotional need, when something is happening. Emotional attunement. Do you love me? Yeah, I love you. Well, I don't know. I don't feel like you love me, right? We want to be able to say, yeah, I love you. You're really fun to be with. Oh, yeah, you're fun to be with too, right? Emotional attunement. We can feel the same about each other. Honesty and transparency. Oh, so important in a relationship, right? Anybody, you don't have to raise your hand, but I'm gonna guess that at least several of you have had a time when it was really hard to get I guess we'll just call it the truth or the honest opinion from your significant other. And it's so important to get that honest opinion, and yet sometimes it feels like you never get it. And then again, last but not least, commitment to the relationship. Yeah, all kinds of things get in the way of our lives. Having a diagnosis of Parkinson's is definitely going to get in the way of a relationship. How do we stick together when we've got this, now we've got this disease? Don't worry, I love you. I'm going to be there. Okay, caregiving 101. I do a lot of work with caregivers, both spouses, significant others, and adult children. So becoming a caregiver is very conscious. You don't just kind of stumble into it, right? As the awareness of becoming a caregiver starts to form in your mind, you're like, oh, where do I start? Where's the Caregiver 101 book, right? What I like to emphasize, often people might start saying, and I hear this at times, I might hear a person say, I just need to accept this, right? Okay, interesting. Let's talk about that. Or I just need to know, what are my adjustments? So what I like to point out is that we don't know. It's an active part of your caregiving day to day, right? It's always, what's today? What will I be accepting today? And how will I be adjusting today? And then tomorrow, we start over again, right? Caregiving is reciprocal. It is not meant to be just you give everything and get nothing back. When we are working with our loved one and we are doing what we can as a caregiver, what we can give in that moment, right? We know we're looking for something coming back to us, to reflect back to us. It can be very hard to get. We need something. So we start to, we want to be able to explore, what are my emotional needs in that moment? Are they being met? Because caregiving gets so challenging. Okay, there are 2 F words and 2 P words and 3 C words to remember. And we're going to go over these. Fear and failure, procrastination, perfectionism, curiosity, courage, and confidence. Fear and failure. Fear, very common human experience. It's a normal response, right? We are, again, a very unique species, and we are always thinking about our survival. That's why we've got the 2 eyes, the 2 ears. I mean, we are just kind of incredibly adaptable, survival-oriented beings. When we have something that's unknown or uncertain, that causes us to have a physiological reaction. Caregiving is a commitment to another person. And caregivers often they're not thinking about themselves. They will be thinking about, what do I need to do for that, for my significant other? And even the fear of, how will I be able to do that for my significant other, for my loved one? And regardless of the length of the relationship, so what I mean by this is that we could have a relationship that is uh, many, many years, many decades, or it could be something less than that. The caregiver has to be able to navigate through his or her own personal emotional response. Right? We kind of have to get a little bit more into our reflective moments. Why am I feeling the way I am? What can I do about it? Is it a negative response? Can I shift it up a little bit? Caregivers do have to overcome that fear of failure. What if I don't do this right? If I don't do this right, if I don't make the right choice right now, then what is that going to do to a future tense? No pressure on that one. Procrastination and perfectionism. Um, Again, normal human responses, especially these kind of probably get a little bit into some socialization too, right? We procrastinate when we don't want to do something, or that we have a fear we're going to do it wrong. Now, thinking back your own personal responses, you get to explore that on your own. We're not going to do that as a group. You could explore on your own, how much, how perfect do I need to be? We just got this brand new diagnosis. We're trying to figure out what's going to do to our relationship. How perfect does the relationship need to be as we go through this? I see this often. It's internalized as not having motivation. I'm just not motivated. Or somebody might say, well, you know what? You're not doing that, so you must not be motivated. For all of you out there, if anyone ever says you're not motivated, you can say, well, I'm not motivated for that task, okay? But in general, I'm a really highly motivated person. But doing that thing, I don't really want to do that thing. So that's a part when I do some self-care boundary with caregivers. It is to help them not internalize failure, that I just don't want to do that thing. Well, that's not because you're a failure. We often see perfectionism is often associated with procrastination. We may delay that response because we grew up thinking that things had to be perfect, and now we're in a situation where it could be kind of messy, and maybe we don't want to do it because we're not gonna get that sense of for those of us that are task oriented, right? It may not feel like we're going to do it perfectly. Moments of reflection to explore our procrastination and perfectionism are wonderful moments to apply that curiosity. Why am I procrastinating? Oh, well, why do I feel I need to be so perfect when this is something I've never had before in my life? It's most likely it's just a part of how you grew up, or whatever community you were in, or anything. Sometimes people have their own sense of standard of performance. I've got to do it this way. All right, the antidotes: curiosity, courage, and confidence. Now, these all come from Brene Brown's influence on me. When I first listened to Brene Brown and she's talked about curiosity, I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't need any medication. I need curiosity. And it was already innate in me. I knew it. It had always been kind of one of those things like, girls aren't supposed to be like that. Girls aren't supposed to be asking questions all the time. And so it was kind of, pushed down a little bit. But when I discovered that it was really my super strength, and then I discovered that it was going to actually be a part of addressing my own sense of discomfort, I just really embraced it. So curiosity, courage, and confidence. Curiosity, gee whiz, I wonder why I'm feeling that way. Okay, confidence, or I'm sorry, courage. Okay, I can explore that feeling, I can explore this situation, and it's not going to result in, it's a thought. I'm going to explore it and I'll be able to get through it. And then again, confidence is what we build when we go through that cycle. Okay, changes to anticipate. Um, Role changes and caregiver strain. We'll look at each of these individually. Communication breakdown. This is a part of receiving the diagnosis, going through the stages of as there's neurocognitive decline and functional decline. And these all occur at different times for the patient and then for the caregiver. Emotional and mental health changes, intimacy and sexuality changes, loss of independence and identity, social isolation, and power dynamics. So I'm hopeful that some of you out there, that some of these topics or some of these areas are resonating for you. So what we want to do is when we're in these changes, in this shifting, this emotional shifting that we're doing, we want to be able to talk it out. We are a verbal. We use our speech for really conveying all kinds of intent, right? We have nonverbal and verbal. So when we start to have all of these emotions, these new feelings come over us, and we don't have the words, we start to struggle. We're not really sure what we feel. We might even feel that what we're feeling is inappropriate. And with this perspective, what we want to identify is that the feelings are very appropriate. They're a part of your experience of life in the moment. So no judgment on how you feel. Okay, using prompts. I love prompts. I learned how to, it was actually when I was doing my social work program. And so being a 60-year-old person in a social work program is, you tend to be unique. Most of the other students are younger. And but part of the work is using a lot of prompts. You're always reflecting, and so I would tease my classmates that would be like, "You guys only have 2 or 3 decades of reflection, and I have like 6 decades of reflection to kind of sort through." So anyway, but using prompts individually, it's a great way for us, and even with each other, it's a great way for us to start kind of exploring this area, this emotional territory that maybe we just didn't know it was going to be there. Prompts help us to take a difficult discussion and to try to use some less emotionally intense words. It helps us to avoid the you statements. Well, you said, or you did, right? Now, how did that feel when I said that, right? Versus I need, right? If we say I need, we're going to turn that need back to ourselves and try to reflect it to our partner. Allowing times for pauses. This is a great, great tool. If you've ever been in any kind of situation where you're just on the verge of just like, oh, I'm just going to blow up, at that point you can say, I wonder what it is, or if I think of it this way, right? It gives you a pause. We start to pull back on that urgency. Very important with relationships. We want to emphasize respect and admiration. So using the more neutral language allows us to say, Yeah, you're always like leaving the towel on the floor, but that's okay. I love you for it. Supports the person we want to be. I don't want to be the person always telling you to pick up the towel. I don't want to be the person who's always trying to remind you to take out the garbage. I want to be the person that looks at the towel on the floor and says, you know, one day the towel's not going to be on the floor. You're not going to be here with me, and I'm not going to worry about a towel on the floor. So it lets us to take that break and think about what we really want in that moment. Okay, so some strategies. We're going to separate the person from the symptoms. When we have a symptom that is being misread, misinterpreted, we want to be able to say, whoa, that is really impacting me. I'm really feeling that. I've got a real feeling of discomfort, and I need to check in. Now, this could be a reflection. Could this be the Parkinson's? Could it be the medications? Is it something else? And the pause before we start to get too much into what's going on here, you know, what is, is this a part of the disease process? What is it that we're experiencing? When frustration is turning into blame, right? We want to be able to use the I need statements. Now, this does come from that Gottman Foundation of Trust. When couples are using that particular approach, there's a lot of coaching on I need. I'm starting to feel overwhelmed. What I need right now is let's take a break, or and whatever. What I need right now is let's not use loud voices. We want to try to remove ourselves from the you never, you do this all the time, right? Those types of statements. Autonomy. Well, caregiving, it's not unusual, right? Caregiver makes the decision, well, I need to do everything now. I need to do this. I have to pay the bills. I've got to take the car to the shop. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. And oh my gosh, overwhelmed, right? In the meantime, patient is like, hey, I can do my own bath. I can do my own clothes. I can do this. I can do that. I can still drive, right? So this is a very important balancing of the relationship. Yeah, I know you want to drive, but I'm really concerned about safety. So what can we do to minimize the risk? Caregivers nearing burnout. Caregivers in the room, so important for you to check in with yourself. If it's hard for you to check in with yourself, then hopefully you can create a relationship with another trusted person who will give you honest feedback. I'm starting to see this kind of thing happening. Could you be getting close to burnout? We want to be open to those observations from our other family members or other friends. And we want to create that language with our loved one about where we're at with caregiving. I just recently was working with an individual, and she had to experience where it was I think a catheter leak, and was getting ready for bed, catheter leak, the bed is wet, change the sheets and everything. And it was just kind of, everything was really cascading. And she was able to go through that process and recognize where she was at. She was able to say, I've got to take a break. This is just too much for me right now. And that's an okay thing to do. Caregivers, give yourself permission in very stressful situations to say, I just got to take a break, just step away for a bit. And you develop that. Can we do this better next time? What can we improve on? the sideways conversations, right? We start out trying to think of a solution for one thing or another, but then it goes off into the, off into the woods someplace. Stop, right? Wait, we need to get back to where we started. We've gotten too far off and we've started to make, accusations towards each other. Let's pull it back. We want to stay connected. Staying connected is the most important thing. Naming the unspoken grief. Grief hides irritation, because we've got fear built up into that, and it can come out in, why is it that I always have to do this for you? Why is it that this is always, I've told you, don't leave the house, right? That, if you hear yourself saying that, that's a great time to reflect and say, well, where am I at with my grief, right? Recognizing the grief. Again, very normal to have a sense of loss, okay? A sense of loss. Intimacy check-in. Yeah, we used to do this. Is there something, what can we do? What feels good today? The future without panic. Let's take a little break. We'll get this figured out. We're in this together, and we'll come back and talk about how fast we have to get this done. What is the urgency? Appreciation. Yeah, you always leave the towel on the floor, but I really like how you do this. I really like how you, take care of the garbage or walk the dog or whatever it is, right? Always think of a way to appreciate even the small things. And we are a team. We're in this together. This is not just you or not just me. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think we've got time for questions, right? Okay, great. Oh, yeah. Here.
Yeah, give you this. Yeah, I can do it. Yeah, if you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone to you, and then I'll bring it back over to Lisa. No questions? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Just so everyone can hear me. I know you can hear me, Lisa. Really, really great presentation. Thank you so much. As someone else that works in mental health, how does your approach change when you're working with someone with Parkinson's disease as opposed to the general population, if at all?
So the question was, how does my approach change? If it's if it's maybe uncontrolled diabetes versus Parkinson's or versus Alzheimer's, I'm very behaviorally focused, and so it doesn't change much. It really stays focused on what's happening in the present moment. What does the patient, if the patient can describe, right? Which is not, I think I'm losing my mind. I can't get this done. So again, it goes back to what can you do versus what can't you do. That's a little bit of that cognitive challenging, right? More positive thought process. For the caregiver, being with the caregiver in that moment of, I just cannot stand what he's doing anymore. Okay, let's explore that. So again, very behavioral, very emotional. Let's explore why you can't stand that. Well, it's because blah, 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 right? I mean, there's a concept out there which is, it's called deconstruction of anxiety. And that particular approach encourages the individual to take that level of anxiety. It might be pretty high, very high level. I just don't like how blah, whatever, something very general. And then we work with the person to go a little lower, a little lower, a little lower. Oh, well, that anxiety is coming from when I was in, 7th grade, and sometimes there's a childhood thing involved there. But we encourage the individual to go to that level of where that anxiety is coming from. These concepts come from the conceptualization that what we feel it didn't just start yesterday. It comes from a lifetime of experiences, going through challenges. I was just working with someone last night who she's a caregiver, working really hard on some very important documents, end of life documents, and had lots and lots of difficulty with some of the interpretation of some of those documents. And so, with a little coaching, she was able to say, finally, she was able to say, here's what happened to me. And then then that way I was able to then tailor my conversation and say, okay, now I know where your fear is coming from, where your anxiety is coming from. So what if I give you this information? Will that help to then help you process that anxiety? Yeah.
Does anybody else have a question? Okay.
Linda, thank you very much for your presentation today. I was especially interested in the part about procrastination. I'm a very good procrastinator without Parkinson's. I, if I ever was without Parkinson's, I don't know. But since I've identified Parkinson's and been diagnosed, I can procrastinate really easily. It seems to me my procrastination ability rose up in response to the Parkinson's. I don't know if I'm the only one who feels that way. Well, do you have anything to say that might help us procrastinators move on?
I think that I can say something to that. So if we were one-on-one, I would say I would really like to explore this. I would say, I'm really curious, right? I'm going to use that curiosity and I'm going to find out if you're able to tell me more about the judgment that you have on yourself as a procrastinator. The behavior is, I don't want to do that. And I don't want to do it tomorrow. I don't want to do it the next day. And I won't do it next year. And I would say, let's find out what that's all about. It sounds like there's something about that task or that thing that you're not really feeling very comfortable about. It makes you feel uncomfortable. So we would use some of those behavioral models. What are you feeling? You're feeling a level of discomfort. I wonder where it's coming from. And then at the end of that, or at some point, you might say, aha, now I know why I'm procrastinating about that thing. And what I do try to do with my clients is, once you recognize that, the goal is for you to say, and I love myself despite that. Because we want to get to a point of self-compassion, and we want to get it to a point of not having judgment about ourselves. We didn't just, design this situation for us. We didn't design this experience. It is a part of our being a human and subject to all the biological forces. When we receive a diagnosis, we didn't go dial it up and say, give me the diagnosis of the day or whatever. It happened to us. When things happen to us, we can feel helpless and out of control. And getting back some degree of management, control, we're going to go through a lot of processes for that. We're going to reach out for help. We're going to reflect. And we're going to practice self-compassion. I did not ask for this. This happened to me. And now where do I go with that? Yeah. So did everybody hear? How do you have less verbal forms of connection. And thinking about ourselves as humans, who in here doesn't need to be hugged once in a while, right? We all need physical connection. When we are beginning to have less verbal, we're going to have to go to a form of connection that is going to be a lot more touch, as to the degree that the individual will let us, right? We may need, as a caregiver, we may need some form of touch too. And that's when we're going to reach out to our friends, our family members. We're going to ask for hugs too. So it's, again, we're going to use everything we can that we as humans experience, and we're going to take advantage of whatever's needed. Okay.
Very good. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much.